paper reports that two of the male prostitutes were given a late-night tour of the White House last year.
You want answers. I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome back to the Nick Bryant podcast. I survived my hip replacement and subsequent post-operative microbial invasion. And I'm back for new and exciting episodes of the Nick Bryant podcast. To make sure I was properly primed for my return to the podcast, I took my weekly shower today, and I had my annual haircut last week. My first post-sabbatical guest is Aiden Gabor. The publisher Skyhorse sent me his book, Conflicting Loyalties, My Life as a Mob Enforcer Turned DOJ Informant, and I gave it a read. Aiden is a pseudonym because there are potentially homicidal people out there who don't feel very warm and fuzzy towards him. Skyhorse and Aiden also requested that we not show his face during the interview. I previously written about the mafia, and I felt Aiden had a compelling story to tell. We had some technical difficulties early on in the interview, so we're going to join the interview as Aiden is talking about his familial background.
My mother, they both immigrated from Europe after 1956, the revolution in Hungary. And it grew up, my mom was very loving. I don't know what anybody out there would ever say that they're not my mama's boy, but I was a mama's boy. And my life, every day, always talked and everything with my parents, but it was a normal childhood.
Your mother had, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead, sir. Nothing really stood out. It was just a normal childhood, I guess you can say.
Your mother had gone through a hellish ordeal in Europe because of the Russians, and you didn't know about that till much later in your life. Could you?
Yeah, I did not know about that. They grew up. They were young during World War II. They were in Budapest. So they went through the Nazis, and then they went through the Russians coming in, and it was a very tough between both of them. And I think a lot of my attributes and everything with me came from my parents and what they went through, the ordeals. And you're right. I did not find a lot of stuff about my mother till after her passing. And that's when my father we finally talked. It was a number of years we did not talk. And I found a little bit more about the family.
You kind of had an impromptu talk with your father in Florida, where he filled you in on the hell that your mother had gone through. And then I think you were able to work on establishing a relationship with him at that point. This was after your mother had died.
Yes, sir. Yeah, he decided I don't know how we want to look at it, but I think it came more towards, my wife said, you need to bury the hatchet. One of you two need to get this shit straight. And then we went and we met and we talked for several days. And a lot of the stuff I learned, when she was passing, she would go into her little nightmares and explain things and start yelling things and talking about the Russians coming in and the Nazis coming in and all that. And I didn't understand fully. And then my father, he filled me in on all the activities they had to go through and all the hell they went through during World War II and the uprisings in 56.
The Russians weren't very benevolent at that point. And your youth is kind of interesting. It was an amalgam of delinquency and also athletics. Tell us a little bit about your high school years.
Well, my high school years was, I in high school, I played ball. I played several sports, but football was my passion. And I played as a youth, but I started hanging around with people that were associated with my father. And at a very young age, I started, before even high school, I started, hanging out and doing things with these guys, riding my bike around. And they asked me, hey, can you drop this off somewhere and then just bring back something? Don't describe it. And then I would do it, and knowing these guys are good friends, they're like family. And I did that, and I got into I guess you can say, as I was younger, getting a crew, but I had a don't give a shit attitude. I didn't care about other people. I didn't care about if they got hurt or anything, and I really didn't care if I got hurt. And I think it's that non-empathy I always grew up with. And I still, to this day, have that. I care about family and friends. The rest of the world I can give a shit about. And that's how I grew up. I would get into scuffles where I don't back down. And I learned, wisdom, learned how I got beat up and got hurt. But I learned, okay, I got to protect myself with this better. And I figure I need to get the first lick in. And that's how I grew up learning with the people I associate with. This is what you got to do to survive.
Your book is filled with a high degree of violence. Why do you think you lacked that empathy?
Honestly, Nick, I don't know. I actually, said therapists and all that, and they all said that, went through those testing, and you have no empathy. I don't know. I don't know if it's a mental thing. But, I read in a couple books that if your family goes through a very violent upbringing, it tends to almost culminate towards you becoming something of that. And it depends what you get into. And unfortunately, I got into a very, I'm going to call it hectic. Would I regret what I did? No, I have no regrets. Would I do it again? Probably, because what I was doing, I felt power. And I learned that respect is everything. And if you don't have respect, if you have somebody disrespect you, disrespect yourself. So learning all that, and don't back down. And that's kind of how I grew up with that. And I think that's how they look at it, as I don't give a shit attitude, and it is what it is attitude. That's how I have in life. Unfortunately, I still have that.
You eventually met a captain of the Cavalcante family. For my listeners that don't know, the Cavalcante family is the New Jersey organized crime family, and it's what the Sopranos were patterned after. And you met this at everything. All the names in your book are pseudonyms, but could you tell us a little bit about the Cavalcante capo that you met, Eddie?
Wow, Eddie I met him when I was 10. And it really was kind of funny, we had parties together, the family had dinners, we'd all get together, and all the kids would be outside, and we got a lot of fights, and we go in and we're all bloodied up, and everybody's like, okay, nobody, let's eat. And then it'd be more like, hey, can you go get me this? Hey, do me a favor, go get me that, would you? And it started off with, oh, sure, Eddie, I'll get whatever you want, but I'll get you, yes, sir, I'll go get it. And a couple of times I did look and say, I'm not good. I ran off. I didn't do it. And he came out, and my father was like, and he'd walk away, and Eddie would slap me around and said, you got to learn to respect. When we talk to each other, learn. And I would like, yes, sir. And I learned from that. There was a couple of guys, Nicky, an older guy there, we call him Nicky. He's an older guy there too that I didn't put in the book, but he helped me along a little bit too. But the respect thing, he says, okay, come by the garage, and we got some things to say you do, because I kind of like you. You got that little swagger. And so I started riding my bike over there, and I was 11, just started taking stuff away. And the whole thing you look at it is, everybody talks about Cabo and everything, and it really, it wasn't like they do portray in the movies. I guess you can say, yes, there's a lot of violence, and yes, there's respect, but it was more of yes, sir, no, sir. You do this. Don't let anybody disrespect you. They respect you, they respect all of us in the crew. And you learned as kind of a family, but you did fight amongst each other like a family, like brothers in there, you fight. And I grew up not having brothers or sisters. So that's how I learned really with everything through them, you know, and my father being working to everything, he was there, but he wasn't there. So,
and you met Eddie through your father? Is that how you met him?
Yes. Yes, sir. That's the first time I met him with my father. We went to have dinner, and then we went a couple times to parties. We did a couple Christmases, and yeah, I met him through all that. But it just became like he kind of like, oh, I like this kid. He's got a little bit of an attitude, and that's kind of he said to me. He said, I like you. You got an attitude. You listen though. That's the big thing. A lot of don't listen, and you learn. I get into fights, and then the next thing I win the next fight and be a much bigger person than me. But I was not a small kid. I was a pretty big, good for my size, pretty good sized kid. And from learning from my licks, I learned how to defend myself and how to be a brawler, I guess you can say, and then learn other ways to protect yourself. And I think he saw something in that, and he liked it. He didn't have any kids, so he kind of brought me in to under his like you know, I'm gonna say teachings, but he was more like I can't even put the words what he was. He was like an extra father to a second father figure towards me.
He was a paternal figure. It sounds like your dad was absent most of the time, so Eddie must have filled in as a paternal figure for you.
Yes, he did. I know parents were very good friends, and he would always come in and he'd check on my mother and just make sure we were all right. And then when I started doing, I guess, things for him, it just became a stronger bond between the two of us.
And you started boosting cars for Eddie, and also playing the heavy at times. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I was in there. The first thing was showing me we had another guy in there named Dominic, and he would show me how to. He goes, here. We were in the shop, and he's like, here. You see this car? This is how you pop it. You use the screwdriver. You do this. You can get this. Especially some of these cars are so easy. Let's see how fast you can do it. And he says, you want to make some good money? Grab a car now and then. But again, if anything ever happens, you're doing something like this, you're being stupid. You're being a kid. Don't say it. Don't say a word. Don't let the flatfoots know what you're doing. Don't say a fucking word. And I learned that, and I boosted several cars in my day. A couple times I got in the scuffles over it, and I did outrun. I had one where the cops were after me, and I ran them and hid and brought it in, and they were like shocked on that. And it's just, I learned as we went on how to do things like that, boosting cars, fighting. I went and I eventually collected money and intimidated a lot of people.
And you were relatively young when you were doing this, like 17 years old.
Actually younger, yes.
Younger?
Like I said, I was a good size for my age, but I had that I didn't give a shit attitude, and I would defend myself. I don't care what it took, if I had to grab a pipe or if I had to grab anything, I would use it. And I don't know what they saw, but I think my biggest thing now is I think they look at, hey, if something happens to the kid, nothing to do, but we like this kid. He listens and he does what he's told to a point. So I learned, and like I said, older guy named Nicky, we call him, he taught me a lot. And the first thing he taught me was carry an ice pick. And I looked at him, he said, don't carry a knife. Don't carry a knife. I go, well, why? He says, you need something like that. You don't slash him. This punctures anything. You puncture a vest, goes through someone's thigh. He says, you just do that, you're gone. And then you can't trace it. And I kind of laughed at that. He goes, "You think I'm joking?" And that's why, to this day, I still carry an ice pick with me almost everywhere I go.
And why do you carry an ice pick to this day? Are you afraid that your life is in jeopardy? I mean, or is it just a habit?
It's a little bit of both. I also carry a gun with me at all times. I've done that since I was 16, and yeah, I've had some issues or just gotten some altercations over things, and people assuming and saying that I did things. I mean, one thing I'm going to say out there is everything I've done in my life, I've never said one thing against the crew and people I've been with in that part of my life. Even though I've been asked, I used to tell them, fuck off. I would never rat on my crew. I did other things, and that's the first thing, but doesn't matter. If they suspect something, it's that's just the way it is. And unfortunately, I think it's a little bit of paranoia and habit.
What I found interesting about your book, or one of the things that I found interesting about your book, was that you were able to pull off the life of a delinquent hooked up to the mob. And also, you were a very good receiver on the football team for your high school, and ultimately got recruited by a major university. How did you balance those two? That would be like some major cognitive dissonance, boosting cars for the mob and then playing high school football.
Yeah, high school football is you do practice and you go to games. I mean, that's about it. And then you have time in between school and stuff. And I wasn't the greatest at school. I did have a disability. And on my time off, I would hang out at the garage, and it was like almost like a social club. Guys would play cards in there and stuff. And it wasn't, there was several things going on. It wasn't just, a chop shop. It was more, we would have, you run money, you would have gambling. They did have some prostitution, which I never was any part of, that he kept me away from. I think it's more because of my age, and he didn't want me to mess with the girls. But
this is Eddie the Capo.
Yes, Eddie would be always, he was always like a hawk with me. I mean, I got into a lot of, his right hand man, I guess, is Dominic. Him and Dominic, for some reason, just didn't like me. I don't know why. But him and I got in a lot of scrapes. When I was 14, he pushed me down and all that. And I grabbed the pipe and I hit him and I knocked him down. I mean, I'm sure my swing wasn't greatest, but of the whole case, all of a sudden Eddie got involved and stopped in the middle of it, because I think it would have been worse. I probably wouldn't be here right now.
Yeah, but you can't hit mob guys. It's a universal rule. You can't hit guys that are made. Without some difficulty.
Yeah, there's to a point where it's a misunderstanding, because he hit me first. And I was getting back down. It was part of my problem. And I think that's what Eddie liked. Eddie stepped in and said, both of you stop. This shit's stopping now. And yeah, there was some I guess ass kissing afterwards I had to do. But to a point we came to understand each other. There was a time in the car that we were driving and he just laid me out. And he says, okay. I mean, when I kind of came to, he's like, we're even to a point. He said, yes, sir. But it's a respect thing. And I felt disrespected when he hit me, and I retaliated. And I think he may have realized that, because I'm not sure why he hit me. To this day, I have no idea why he hit me. And he's been my major, he's no longer around. He was my major headache after everything.
So I was also a juvenile delinquent, but I could not play football. I could not do that. I was too rebellious. But I did play football in college, which during my rebelliousness, in high school, I kind of missed that. And you were a wide receiver. You must have had a good 40 speed. What was your 40 time?
I had a 4.6, sometimes 4.59, but 4.6 is my average.
That's not bad.
I had some feet. I had some legs. It was more of I had good hands. That was my big thing. I don't care where the ball was, back behind me, above me, beside me, I'd catch it. I think, again, I didn't care about going. A lot of guys couldn't go across the middle. I didn't care. I was also, if I call, I was looking to put punishment on somebody else too.
I played on defense, and we had a very innovative defensive scheme. We were 3-4 and also 4-3. And I played on the line, and you wouldn't measure my 40 with a stopwatch. You would measure my 40 with a calendar. So I was never very fast. But I did enjoy that camaraderie. So you've gotten a scholarship to a pretty major college, and you're playing football, and then suddenly you're visited by a couple of FBI agents, I believe, or were they Justice Department agents?
They were DOJ. There were a couple real fuckheads, but yeah, they visited me one day, and being 18, 17 going 18, and not the knowledge like I have now. They did this, the old scare thing. If you don't do this, we're going to do this. We have pictures of you. And then when they showed the picture of my mother is when everything kind of turned, like, they showed my dad, and I'm like, okay. It's when they put my mother into the mix that we can bring her in because she's associated with them. They made pictures of Eddie and her together. And I'm like, oh, shit. What? At that point, they put the fear of God in me, I guess you can say. Being non-religious at that time, extremely non-religious, I was like, what the fuck do I do now? And they said, think about this. And then a couple months later, they showed back up and said, how was your thinking? Did you enjoy your time? And I mean, I was scared to death not for myself, for my mother. And that's kind of all that kind of rolled all together.
So did those DOJ agents, did they tell you, they visited you, you were at college, and they ultimately turned you? Did they tell you what type of charges you were looking at? You're a little vague in the book on that.
Like, yeah, really the stuff they just kind of threw out there was RICO, and I didn't know any. I mean, I didn't know any of this shit was. They said that we know what you were doing. You got lucky that you never got caught, you never got put in jail, and we don't know how you got away with it, but we got you now. And if you don't, we're giving you a choice here. We're going to give you have a chance. And I'm like, oh, okay. And it says we're not bringing you in as technically an undercover informant. You're just informing us what's going to happen. You're going to be by yourself. If something happens, we can give a shit if something happens to you. And they're being outraged that you're going to do this, but you're doing this on your own. And but this is how you can save your ass. And I, not knowing at the time, I was scared I'm gonna be honest, scared for my mother. And I listened and did what they asked.
One thing I learned as a juvenile delinquent is always deny.
Yeah, I did. I did all kinds of. I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. It's when they bring those pictures out and they're showing all kinds of stuff, and it's not just one or two; it's several, maybe 100. And you kind of get, you knew what you did inside. You knew what you did. And you always say, "No, fuck you, I ain't saying shit." But I'm like, I'm not saying shit about these guys. And he goes, we don't care. We already know what they did. They're getting theirs. We need you for something else. And I'm like, shit, okay. That's kind of how it went to. And then when they told me what they're looking at, I'm gonna be honest. As I got older, I learned, I saw these guys and law enforcement doing things, and I thought to myself as I got older, they were supposed to serve and protect. They were supposed to be with the bad guy, with us. At the time, I didn't really think about it, and it was just they were just there and doing things. And they talked to me. I mean, a couple times, I would sit there and like, wow, I see their badges going. You guys cops? Like, yeah, shut the fuck up, kid. And I just go about my business. But as I got older, I learned that in my mind, that that these guys were doing things they shouldn't be doing.
So they ultimately wanted you to become a cop and infiltrate police departments. How, given your rearing and your delinquency, that must have been a tough pill to swallow to become a cop.
Yeah, it was one of those moments in life that you say, what do I do? And not being religious, I really didn't think about it. And I was told, first thing I was told too is don't say a word. Don't say it to your mom, don't say it to your father, because then that's it, the deal's off. You're just gonna go to jail. You're looking at like you'll be out of jail in your 70s kind of thing. And I thought to myself, well, what do I do? I mean, I've never been a person that really talked a lot. I was not one to say shy. I was more a listener, learn to listen, and then before you act, see what the deal is. And yeah, it was extremely hard. And then I also thought, these guys shouldn't be doing. It's not like I'm going to go after good cops or anybody being good. I was going after guys that I knew, not all, but most of them, I knew they were doing bad things.
So you ultimately became a cop, and the feds that you were working for knew about a police officer in New Jersey that was doing hits. And that was your first assignment, was to get some evidence on this police officer that was doing hits. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that one was, when they told me the guy, I'm like, I don't know this. But then when I first met him, I was like, now I recognize this guy. And he was more of a loner. A lot of guys didn't talk to him, and that's kind of, I think, his way was. But then we started talking, and then after he goes, what the fuck are you doing here? And I'm like, look, and he goes, I know you, man. You ran with Eddie. And I'm like, that's old school. He goes, how you being a cop? I go, we all change. He goes, that fucker's going to jail. He's in jail, or he's on the run, or whatever the fuck's going on with him. I go, I don't know. I don't know what the fuck's going on. I'm just here to do my thing. And he's like, really? I go, yeah. I go, he goes, but we all have our little side gigs. Everybody's doing everything. He goes, yeah, and he kind of laughed. And it took several months for me to become friends with him and his wife and the family. And it was just him and his wife. And yeah, eventually he opened up because he had a laugh. He goes, well, you know what I'm talking about. I go, talking about what? He goes, well, you ran with a pretty tough crew. You guys did a lot of bad shit. I go, okay, that's history, but I got my stuff now I'm doing. He goes, yeah, I bet you are. And he just started talking, and he opened up and started telling me. And the worst one was when we were drinking one night, and his wife is like in tears. And I'm like, are you okay? And she's just like, no, yeah. She goes, I heard you guys talking. So you used to run. I know who Eddie is. I go, yeah, I did a lot of stuff. And she opened up about it. And she's like, I don't know what to do. And I'm like, it's killing me inside. I go, you know what? You just need to be quiet. I go, he looks like he's crazy. I talked to him. He is. He's not quite all running with the reservation. He's way off the reservation. And so when I got back to the two agents, I told them, hey, if you want something, the wife's throwing the pump because she's at the end. She's about to give it all up. I mean, even though I'm married, but she is willing to, I think, go now talk. Well, what else got? Well, he told me the stuff he did, but they like, well, we just want information on what we can do to get to him. And when he told me everything, I didn't wear wire and have anything like that. He just told me. I told him what he said. And I said, go after the wife and that's what they did.
How did the feds know that this officer was performing hits? Did they ever tell you that?
No, I did ask, like, what do you know this? Because they just knew he associated with people. And what they were telling me, the only story I got, and I got it from Terry too, was that, hey, you know, he'd do a hit and he'd be like the first officer on scene.
Yes.
So it kind of worked out that, hey, you know, his prints are there. How do you can explain everything. And they were figuring something was up. It just, to them, I think it didn't gel, but they didn't really tell me other than this is what we need. But I learned growing up, you know what? Don't push for information, because then they're going to be more assholing to you. And if they ask you to do something, do it, and then go from there. And I'll find out that information on my own, which I did. And that's kind of how that all worked out.
When we think of cops doing hits, it's anathema because it goes against serve and protect. But I wrote an article about cops doing hits for the mob. I visited the boss of the Lucchese crime family in his subterranean digs at the Supermax prison in Florence, Colorado. It houses approximately 400 of the worst criminals in the country, or criminals that the United States has the most antipathy for. And it was an interesting conversation. I hung out with him for a day, and he ultimately told me that he was using cops for hits. And he also told me about an FBI agent that was an informant. And I went back and I wrote an article about it, and I found some evidence that those cops were in fact doing hits for this mob boss. And the feds knew about, this was 1999, but the feds knew about it in 1994. And the magazine wouldn't publish the article. It's defunct, the magazine. It's called Gear. It was owned by Bob Gucci. The publisher is Bob Guccione Jr. So I sat on all this information from 1999 to 2005, and then they were finally arrested for doing hits for this mob boss. And the feds did not want this mob boss testifying on, and it's kind of interesting. This mob boss went into the witness protection program, and he was, and at the time, Sammy Gravano, the feds were using Sammy the Bull Gravano as a hatchet man for John Gotti. And Gaspipe, that was his mafia moniker, told the feds that Gravano is engaged in all kinds of criminality. The feds were trying to whitewash him, like they always try to whitewash mob informants. And because of that, Gaspipe was booted out of the witness protection program and put in the Supermax. And the feds did a major hatchet job on his credibility. But then I went and visited him, and I just was going to write an article about mob hits. And then he told me about these cops. And the more I dug into the cops, the more I believed him. And those cops ultimately are in prison. Couldn't have happened to nicer guys. So that is a reality with our law enforcement, that some of them really do go, as you had said, go off the reservation and start murdering people.
Yeah, and also you can look at a lot of them work for the gangs and stuff too, and doing almost the same thing. And unfortunately, if money's involved, you're going to get these guys, because they wanted, like the ones that I've dealt with, they wanted to be part of a crew. They wanted to be in that life, and you can tell. And you're right. It's in my heart now. It's wow, can't believe. But the problem is, you gotta look at that. 1,000 good cops are all brought down by one bad cop. They all look like shit because of one. And in my thinking, eventually it was, you know what? If I can get one or two that will make the ones that are good doing good out there to, hey, you know what? There's somebody that's stopping the bad ones out there, because that's what makes anything out here, unreal. And as I was younger, I didn't learn that later in life. That when I grew up, I hated cops. I despised. I was told that they were, evil. And then when you see what the bad ones out there, you think that. But then you realize when I kind of got into law enforcement that these are actually it's the blue line. I learned right away. You got blinders on to a point. You don't snitch on each other. But then you got those bad ones that make those good ones are good. No matter what the good ones did, they always looked as bad. And that's kind of what fueled me in a lot of this.
As a youth, I had an intersection with some really dirty cops one night, and that was not a good night for me. When you talk about these federal agents who turned you, you don't give them glowing reviews. It's more like they're using you and they don't really care what happens to you. That's the vibe I got from your book.
Yeah, I also learned that you are, and this is my life, how I look at it too, you're cog. They're going to use you to get what they want. And then they're going to toss you aside and they're going to make you the bad person too, but not quite. It's to a point, but they do toss you aside. And once they're done with you, they have no use for you anymore. And I don't trust the government because of that. And I don't like the government because of that. But that's what it is. That unfortunately, they're going to use to get to an end of something. Your means to an end. And yeah, I didn't like these guys to start with, because you threatened my mother to start with, and you threatened my family. Being the way I am, I protect my family and I protect my friends. I can give a shit about anybody else in the world. And I did not like these guys. To this day, I still don't like those two fucks. And it makes me very anti-government. I don't think anti-government. I don't trust the government. That's how, and unfortunately, that's what they did to me in that part of it.
I've written about government malfeasance. Covering up those two cops is one of the investigations. I've also done a lot of investigation on child trafficking that has been covered up by the government, which is aiding and abetting child trafficking. So I too have great difficulty trusting various facets of the government, especially our legislators and the Department of Justice, because they have covered up so much malfeasance. You busted this cop, and ultimately he went away for 3 hits. And then they wanted you to switch police departments and go after a drug ring. Tell us about that.
When they popped him, it came out. Everybody called up and said, "Hey, did you hear what happened?" And I'm like, "No." And they're telling me about it. I'm like, "Are you shitting me?" And at that point, several officers quit and left. And it's like, I would say mass exit, but it's more like, okay, what the fuck's going on here? Now the feds are all over the place. So it gave a good thing for me leaving. And I went to a department. I grew up in that town. And they asked me, there's some there I want to look at. And when they said the names, I knew exactly who they were talking about, because I knew these guys. They did stuff with Eddie. And that took a little bit of time for me to accept. But then again, I came to a realization, these guys are POSs. And I didn't like them as a kid. And I figure, you know what? I wouldn't mind fucking these guys over, but let's do it to my head. I got to do it right, because if I'm going to do something, I'm going to have to do it all in. And that's the way I've always been. And when they asked me to do that, I had to get in on myself, and I transferred and got my way. But when I went in there, I knew people in there who knew me. And when the commissioner called me in the office, and he's like, hey, how you doing? And I'm like, hey, how you doing? He goes, Aiden, he goes, we knew each other. I know your father really well. And he goes, you come on here, you'll toe the line, right? Do what you're told. You're one of those guys because we knew you from the past. I'm like, yes, sir, whatever it takes, sir. I go, what do you need me to do? And he's like, oh, no, just, we'll be more than happy to bring you in. I think you'd be perfect fit for the department. And that's how that all started.
And ultimately, you investigated a police officer who was involved in trafficking narcotics. Tell us about.
Yeah, there's several with that one.
There were several, but there was one that you glommed onto initially that led you to a larger ring or network.
Yeah, well, the thing is, they led me to, and the gangs they're working with was well-known, big one. And I knew them, as a kid, when you growing up with a crew in an area that's got gangs and stuff, you don't work together, but you know it's a respect. You don't go in my area. We don't go now. Eddie was a big one that said no drugs. And the words, I can't exactly say the words he said, but basically let them sell up to their own is the kind of word he says, we don't do drugs. And if I find out you're dealing with something in drugs, you're going to have a problem with me. And I kind of looked like, okay, I wasn't in drugs anyway. And I think it was more of a deal thing. We're not going to mess with that. You don't mess with our stuff. And I met a couple of them, I see them on the streets, and they're like, hey, what's up? And I go, hey, what's up? And talk to them. And I knew someone from high school. And it was more of I guess you'd say respecting, like, we don't mess with you don't mess with us. And then you find out, you see these cops were working with Eddie and then also working with these guys. And then eventually when I went in there, saw what they were doing and, told them what they were, got video of them and got it to the two idiots. And it kind of, I'd say roll ball the bigger. I guess it just, then you find out that a lot more was going on once I got in there and realized what they were doing.
According to your book, the mayor was in on that particular drug dealing network.
He really wasn't with the drugs. He really wasn't with the drugs. I mean, I don't know exactly. He was more of he was taking money for other things. And I remember I would bring packages to him when I was a kid. And I would come back and I would see him. And then the funny thing is my first wife, Carrie, was related in a one-way respect to him. And when I first went to the house, I'm like, well, I've been here before. But I didn't say anything to her because I couldn't. And then when he saw me, he turned white and his eyes opened up. And he's like, oh, I got to show Aiden something. Come in and check this out. And he shut through. He goes, please don't tell anything about anything you know. I go, what are you talking about? He goes, yeah. I go, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. Nice to meet you. He goes, thank you. And that was that little conversation. But yeah, he was more taking money. Probably, I'm going to put this look their way. He was involved in a lot of things. I don't think he was involved in the drug aspect of it all. But he was not as everybody thinks, a clean person. And I knew for a fact he wasn't.
Well, it sounds like he was getting money from those cops that were selling drugs, that he was getting a cut. That's how I interpret it.
Yeah, he was. Yes, he was.
And going undercover with dirty cops like that, you know that if they catch you, they will kill you.
Oh, yeah. I had one instance where we were going up a set of stairs, and next thing I'm looking down a barrel of a cig and I'm sorry, a Glock. And I could see the rifling in there, and I'm looking up like, what the fuck are you doing? And his thing, I'll put you down right now like a dog. And nobody would know you came after because of what you did as a kid. We figured out you'd been dirty. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? And he's like, oh, you know what? Then pull the fucking trigger. Because you know what? I know we bite you as a kid. You wanted to be part. You were just a cog. You wanted to be part of the machine. You wanted to be part of the crew, but you couldn't do it because you just didn't have part of it. I was a machine. You were a cog. So they could replace you in a heartbeat. So if you think I'm doing something that looking at you, then pull the fucking trigger. But I got my own deals I'm working on. And you know me from a kid. And he kind of looked at me, and I'm looking up at this point. pulled shit out of my ass to say to him. And he kind of laughed, said, all right, because I heard you're going to toe the line. I go, have I done anything I hasn't? And he kind of laughed and went upstairs as if nothing happened. And I thought to myself, son of a bitch, now I'm gun ho. I'm going to find out what I can on you motherfuckers. You know, yeah, there was a lot of incidents where if they suspect you were thinking you were going to, you weren't going to breathe much longer. You're going to have some extra, you're going to die of lead poisoning or something.
Your longevity would be truncated. It's interesting with the mafia. There are a lot of mafioso who sell drugs, but the rule is you can't sell drugs. Ultimately, it is you can't get caught selling drugs. That's how the mafia works, as far as drugs. And
yeah, you're correct, sir. Yes, sir.
And throughout this period, you were married and you had 2 children. And you didn't tell anyone that you were a government informant. There must have been times where you wanted to tell your wife. You were drinking a lot. You were under a lot of stress. There must have been times where you wanted to tell your wife, I'm working as a government informant and I'm under a lot of stress.
Oh, I can't tell you the times I played Russian roulette. I pulled that trigger. To this day, I can still hear the clicking. And there was a lot of, they told me don't say anything or deals. I don't care where you were in it. And I couldn't because I didn't trust her. Let me be honest, because of her family. I didn't, it just held up inside of me. And yeah, I did a lot of drinking. I became an alcoholic. I used to have a lot of stupid visions of, your snitch. I'd see the patron St. Michael with the flaming sword coming at me that you're doing bad things. And I would be waking up in sweats. And I had a 357 on my side, and I would pull the Colt. It was a Colt 3, and or Colt 2. I would pull the trigger, and I had it around, and I'd spin it and put it in there. I don't know what the powers of it, the spiritual aspect is, but now I understand that it wasn't meant for me to die that way. And yeah, the stress was beyond. I'll be honest, sir, I can't tell you other than that it was a nightmare.
I watched Leaving Las Vegas the other night. I hadn't seen it in quite some time. And you seemed at a certain part of the book dedicated to drinking yourself to death.
Yeah.
And
I was.
And how did you continue to foster a relationship with your children? You've got all these things pulling at you. You're in this police force and these are dirty cops. And then the feds who really don't care about you are using you to go after these dirty cops. You can't tell anybody that you're an informant. How did it affect your relationship with your children?
I do. My boys, they were, we had a very hard, we're better now. But yeah, I did miss a lot. I tried coaching. I tried doing things, but the last stuff got in there. And I didn't want them to see me in certain ways I was acting. Yeah, it was hard. It really was. It was almost like my father's but I tried to not be like my father. I tried to be there. And I was to a point, but I wasn't. I don't know if that's a good way of explaining it. But yeah, we had a very tumultuous time. I mean, I had a point where my youngest was one of the guys in the crew that's still around. He's just no longer here, thank God, was like, hey, Nick told me he's doing some things for him. And I'm like, that ain't going to happen. And he hung up on me saying, the kid's going to do what he wants. And I had actually traveled to talk to him. And we had a little face to face. And after I explained to him the situation's going to be one way or another, he dropped him, and I think my son figured out that and got so mad at me he didn't talk to me for like 8 months because, he was doing pretty good money, and all of a sudden nothing. But I mean, now I think he understands why I did what I did. But yeah, we didn't have a very good relationship.
Well, he was going down a path that you had gone down that ultimately turned into a very negative life experience. And then one day the feds just cut you free. They said, Aiden, we don't need your services anymore. After you'd put your life on the line a couple of times, how did that feel? Tell us about the feds just saying, Aiden, we're letting you go.
Yeah, they're like, well, there's not much for you to do. And I always thought, and I'm gonna be honest, maybe I could become one of them. Maybe I work, more of them. We'll see if I can get people like what I did. Maybe they say we're kind of done, got a little stipend out of it, and that's it. I mean, it's it. There is no going like, you know what? We'll see him. And that was that. I'm gonna be honest. It felt like somebody kicked me in the nuts. I'm like, okay, I guess I'll stay where I'm at now. I'm not, kind of happy I did to a point, because at that point I was already getting done with my ex, who was coming close, and then some things afterwards, like a year or two afterwards, and I ended up staying where I was at, and I ended up meeting my wife, my current, and she changed my life. And yeah, it did. It felt like somebody came out to that, oh fuck, I just got screwed, and that made me hate everything to do with them even more.
So the Fed said we can either give you $300,000 now, or we can give you, I think it was $60,000 a year, starting when you're 50. That was the deal that they made with you.
Yeah, they were kind of talking about maybe when you retire we can do something, but we'll have to put in. And I'm like, and I thought, you know what? How do I explain this? So I explained, I was injured, and she knew, but I just took it because I was like, how to explain? So I took through cash.
The $300,000 at the Fed.
Yeah, I took her out the bed. I told her it was from injuries, and this is what I got payout on it. And she's like, okay, I know that's kind of why you left the department, yada yada yada, and and I thought to myself, okay. And then one day I went to look to get something, and my card got declined. How the fuck did my card get declined? So I went to look at it, and it was maxed out. And I'm like, what the flying? I went to the bank account. There was nothing, hardly anything in the bank account. So I confronted her, and she's like, well, my sister needed it. I'm like, where the fuck would you give her that? Well, she asked, she's got money. Now, everything? Well, she needed this amount because of the house. I go, well, I'm not buying them. I got beyond pissed. That was the last straw for the two of us. And I went and confronted her sister, and she laughed at me. And I said, boy, I had to leave there because I was thinking of burying her somewhere. And I had to leave. And that's the last time I ever talked to that woman. And for her sake. And I just said, and that was the end of it. I ended up just leaving. I just couldn't do it anymore. And everything was kind of rollerballing, and I was still somewhat of an alcoholic. I still had these vivid dreams and stuff. I walked away, and I just walked away. And then that's how I met Sabrina, and she changed my life completely.
Your first wife, she took the $300,000, your blood money from the feds, and that was it. That would make me a little upset too. I got to admit, if I was given $300,000 blood money from the feds and my wife stole it, I'd definitely be upset.
Yeah, it was that whole situation. I mean, it wasn't quite that much at the time. By the time she did it, it was the fact that that's why I never trusted her and her family. Her family ran her life, and they all to this day think everybody's good. That the people they knew that were put away, they were wrongly, accused by somebody. And I hated these fuckers. It's one of those ones. The funniest thing is every time we had a family gathering, it would Thanksgiving, I go downstairs by myself and watch the game. They're like, come and have a drink. I'm like, I drink with people I want to be with. I drink with friends. I don't like you fucks. And they used to get, her brothers used to get so pissed at me. And I just like, you know what? Nah, thank you. I'm going to go downstairs. And that was the part that didn't make it that hard to just walk away. And like I said, I just walked away.
With Eddie, the Cavalcante capo that was your paternal figure, you did not have any contact with him throughout your years in law enforcement. Am I right there?
He called one time. I had a thing, somebody came to me and gave me a note. And they said, go to the, back in the day, we had payphones. And go to his phone at this time. And I got a call. And he's like, you need to just do what you need to do. I understand. I'm calling to tell you this will be the last time we're ever going to speak. I just got a couple things to tell you. It's going to be very brief. He says, I love you like a son. And you know I do have a son, but you just keep an eye on him now and then. And I said, yes, sir. And he said, I had a couple words in Italian. Basically, I loved you. And that was it. The line ended. And that's the last time I talked to him. He passed away a number of years ago, and he got arrested. He eventually got caught. And his wife turned on him, and they wouldn't protect their custody, but I stayed in touch with, he's actually stayed in touch with me. To this day, we kind of stay in touch.
What's interesting is, so when Eddie went away, there was a murder attempt made on your life, and you surmise that it was some of these mob guys that you'd hung out with that didn't like you, that Eddie had protected you from.
Yeah, you know,
how many bullets? Exactly. Describe that. You took some bullets that night. You definitely had some lead poisoning that night.
Yeah, I tried. They tried. It was. I was coming out. I went to a bar. It was raining, just like that stupid drizzle shit, and I smoked a cigarette. And I was walking in my car, and I heard kind of a pop, but I just felt heat. I didn't feel anything but heat. I'm like, but then I felt no, it was heat. And then you see this light, and then I'm like, what the? So I flipped, just get away from it, and I grabbed my, I had a cig. I still just say I have a cig, and I pulled it out, and I was under the car, and I just was firing at feet. And then as I'm laying on the ground, somebody came over me, and I'm just letting go. I'm letting loose. And, it's one of those blurs. It's so fast. I can't even describe it. There was no pain. It was all heat. It was pure heat. And I mean, I could feel like water, but, I got in my car, dragged myself in, and just took off. And I went to my buddy's Don's house and pulled in his garage. And I'm knocking, he comes up with the garage, he comes to the garage, and I'm laying in there, and he's like, what the flying fuck did you do? And I go, no, and I'm trying, because I couldn't even talk. And I'm like, I can't go. Don't take me to the fucking hospital, dude. Just either let me die or figure something out with this. I go, I got those words out. He remember him telling me. I don't really remember what I said. And he's like, oh, no, we'll get you. So I gave him to say, call these guys, these people. And it's people I dealt with. And they came to the house, and I stayed at his place. And we told my ex at the time that we were going to do a vacation, just on and I, just going, and whatever. At that time we really didn't have any communication. She's like, whatever. Told him, I don't want to talk to the son of a bitch. All right, whatever. And then I remember recovering, and it wasn't that. I mean, the recovery really wasn't that long, because a couple went through. Is what they told me. And a couple they got out, they were, well, they didn't have anything too vital. To this day, because of what I have, I did a couple of MRIs, and they always tell me, you got these fragments of something in there. I go, yeah, don't worry about it. Yeah, that was, I could tell you right now, I know who did it. There was Dominic, and I found out later. Now he's long gone past, and to this day, that's kind of why carry what I carry just in case, because you never know. It was a very traumatic time, but a lot of it was very, I had nightmares that brought it all back. And when I started doing therapy, that's how I did the book. It started off as being therapy. And that's what I did and it came back, and those images came back, and a lot of stuff I don't remember at the time came back to me in those night terrors. And that's where my wife, Sabrina's like, you're going to need some help. So we got Sam, a friend of mine, and he's like, yeah, we're going to do help. And it's what we do something. And I opened up to Sam, and he became my spiritual advisor. And he said, we need a therapist. He goes, you need to put this in paper. This might help you overall. And it does. And it doesn't, because I do have a lot of nightmare. And that night is always one of the ones that come back and get me. Between that and my betrayal of the blue line are the two things to this day that really, really get to me at night now and then.
And there was a reason why you didn't want to go to the hospital. You felt like you could be hit when you were in the hospital quite easily.
Oh, yeah. I didn't feel safe. I mean, I knew people that could help me, and that's why I had always carried this in my wallet, this little piece of paper. And he knew the people, and he's like, okay. And he knew me. Now, prior to this, I did open up a little bit to him, but I grew up, he's my best friend, Don, and he helped me out in some of the things I was doing in there. When this happened, he's just like, oh, fuck, are you shitting me? And stuff. And, he had a German Shepherd, and he made sure nobody's come by the house. Yeah, to this day, I saved him a couple times in a couple different incidences, and he saved me. So we became that type of brothers.
And ultimately, it was a mob doctor who took care of you.
A friend of the family.
Because it's always good if you're in the mafia. It's always good to have a doctor around, and especially if you get shot.
It was actually two of them, but yeah, I had three on there, but yeah, two of them, and one of them was one of my mother's best friends, which is kind of funny. So,
and then you met a woman that you ultimately fell in love with, and you were able to change your life.
Yes, sir.
Tell us about that.
It's one of those ones you meet somebody, and the first time I saw her, that I met her, the guys that were at where I work, like, she's the biggest fucking bitch there is out there. She's a bitch, man. And I thought, that's okay. No, she is just, and when I saw her, I'm like, to me, she was beyond gorgeous. And I'm like, wow, really? She goes, yeah, don't talk to her. She's just, she talks to you like you're shit. She thinks she's smarter than you and all that shit. I'm like, well, I'm not going to argue with that. Most people are, but okay. And I talked to her the first time, and she kind of gave that bitchiness a little bit, but I think it's more of her protecting herself. And we got to talking, and then I got the nerve, and to me, it was I usually have nerve for just about anything. And I started talking to her and sending these little stupid little emails, or when you would have like instant whatever bullshit. And she never caught on. And then a friend of hers is like, hey, she kind of likes you. Okay, so I asked her out. And that's how that started. We started going out. And the first time we went on a date, we went to a bar she used to work at. And the owner was an ex-fiance of hers that beat the shit out of her. And talked to her like shit. We were sitting and he started talking all kinds of negative, like being very disrespectful and say, hey, dude, hey, shut the fuck up, leave her alone. All right. He's like, who that for you? And I'm like, don't fucking worry about it. And he just started talking all kinds of shit. And I grabbed him. I just started pounding him on the table. I dragged him outside and I beat the shit. I pistol whipped him. And I'm just like, she was freaking out. And I'm like, let's just get the fuck out of here. We got the hell out of there. He never called the cop because it was her. But I laid a pretty good beat on. She's like, "What the is your problem? Like, is she disrespecting you? I don't like that. No, I don't like anybody that be disrespectful, especially towards women." And I don't know if that helped, but that was our first date, and it was a very good date for me.
That's quite a first date.
Yeah, I thought that was it. I'll be
That's
honest. I
either,
thought, yeah.
a date like that is either going to make it or break it as far as a relationship goes.
Yeah, I thought, yeah, she never did. Then she's like, "Hey, let's go out again." And I'm going to tell you this, she to this day, she still, I would say she busts my chops on it. But I learned from Eddie that, hey, if a girl likes you for you, she'll pay for the dinner. She'll pay for the date. What? Just try it. If she's into you, then she'll pay for it. Just tell her you're kind of strapped. So the first 8 dates, I'm like, I'm kind of strapped right now. I'm going through a divorce, but she's like, "Fine, I got it. So I thought to myself, well, she's a keeper, and that's how that started. And to this day, and then she talks to me and brings things out. Her and Don always said, "You need to be more spiritual. You need to believe in God." And I didn't. My biggest joke was I work for the other guy. I recruit for him. I give him people. I recruit for him. That was my joke. I recruit for the other guy. She's like, "We stop that shit," because she's semi-religious. And she says, "I don't care what religion you're looking at, but we get some spiritual, I knew you grew up Catholic, and I know you don't believe in as much. Will you try? I don't care, and I'll be with you 100%, back you up." And we dated for 10 years before I asked her to marry me. And everybody's like, "Why'd you wait so long?" Like, well, I had her on layaway. I was ready to take her off layaway. So I had to make sure. And after 10 years, we finally got married. That's actually 10 years and 2 months. Oh, I'm sorry, 4 months. And she to this day said, everything I went through, I learned in the high faith. And she went through all the classes with me. She still does it to this day. And it's not matter that it's not what she believes in, but it's something. And she said it has helped me.
And you ultimately embrace the Baha'i faith.
Yes, sir. 100. I mean, the funny thing is, I never really believed it, but their teachings is, men and women are equal. We're all equal people as far as black, white, purple, pink, whatever color you are. We're all equal. We all bleed red. That's how I've always looked at it. And I was never, everybody jokes about, you being in a crew or anything that, we're racist towards it. No, it's not that. Everything's business. It's like the old saying, we had names for everybody. I don't care what religion you were or what ethnicity you were. We called you a name. And some people may have looked at it as, "Oh, that's bad." That's just how we identified with different cultures or different ethnicities, is by names. And it wasn't being racist. Yes, there were some things that they would say, but Eddie was not like that. He told me, "No, you know what? Everybody's the same. If you're going to do something, don't pick a crowd out and be against them, because then you're going to alienate that whole entire part, that whole thing." And like everybody says, in a crew and anything like that, the people you deal with, you hurt them, you're going to kill them. Nobody kill anybody for that, because again, that's business, bad business. You're not going to get money. Most of the people, when they talk about you fought amongst yourselves, other crews, because if they're poaching in your area, that's a problem. So you would have to take it out on them. And then most people were either hurt or killed or other mobsters. They wasn't the normal crew. And as I become religious, I really learned that you need to be better towards the other humans in the world. I mean, I still got my issues. I'm not 100%, but I'm the best Baha'i I can be. But I believe men and women are equal. I believe in all people are equal, and we need to embrace each other. And I really take those writings wholeheartedly. It's just some things it's hard for me to let go of.
Looking back at your life, the carnage, the alcoholism, the tremendous anguish, would you do it again, or would you have taken a much different path? Hypothetical question.
I don't regret, and probably no, I wouldn't change everything. I did enjoy the life at first. When I was young. You know, when you're young and you got this power, I guess you can say, respect, you felt different. And then as I got older and I started taking on, yes, I went through some very tumultuous times. There's just a couple things I would change, but hypothetically, you know, where I felt good when those guys did go to prison. I did feel like I did something. You know, it's hard to this day to feel like you accomplished anything, and I think I accomplished things with the stuff I did. But there's just some little paths I would go differently. I think between my ex and I, may have been a little more, my kids being there for them a lot more. I think that's my biggest that I would do. But as far as everything else, I would probably end up doing it again. It's hard to describe the life, even though it was not that long, but it was something I'll never forget, and I learned from it. And I think coming to the end with the spiritual, I think if I can learn something new every day, and I wouldn't have changed what I did, no, sir.
Well, Aiden, I really want to thank you for the interview, and I'm sure my listeners and viewers will understand why we're not showing your face and why your voice is a little scrambled. It was a hell of a read. Again, Aiden's book is called Conflicting Loyalties, My Life as a Mob Enforcer turned DOJ Informant. Aiden, I want to wish you a good day, and thank you for the interview.